Thank you so much, dear colleagues, partners, researchers, friends. Welcome to the European Parliament. It's a pleasure also for us to host you here and to welcome you today to this session about one of the most decisive questions for Europe's future: how to secure the materials, the technologies, and most importantly, the public trust when we need to deliver an affordable, renewable, and secure energy transition. First, I want to thank you, the European Federation of Geologists, and the Critical Raw Materials Geothermal Project for this organization. Thank you to all for your great interest. In 2024, the European Union adopted the Critical Raw Materials Act, a cornerstone of our strategy to achieve climate neutrality by 2050 and reinforce Europe's strategic autonomy. The Critical Raw Materials Act is more than industrial policy. It is a key component of our green energy transition. Without secure access to lithium, nickel, cobalt, and other strategic minerals and materials, we cannot deploy wind turbines, solar panels, heat pumps, batteries, or electric grids at the speed required, and more important, be dependent from outside. And we certainly cannot guarantee that households or businesses will benefit from the affordability of the renewables and electrification and lower energy bills. But adoption is only the first step. Implementation is the real challenge. Across Europe, communities look at the strategic projects with suspicion, sometimes because of past mistakes, sometimes because they fear that their local well-being will be sacrificed in the name of Europe's big goals. And at the same time, millions of Europeans continue to struggle with high energy prices and the climate emergency, and also, very clear, dependent on third countries with lower standards. If the transition is not fair, if its benefits are not clearly shared, public acceptance will fail, no matter how ambitious our legislation is. This is why today's discussion is important. We need to show and to prove that raw materials policy and clean energy policies are two sides of the same European project, a project that delivers lower costs, stronger autonomy, and a healthier planet. The transformative potential of geothermal and critical raw materials extraction is clear. One of the most promising innovatives lies exactly at the intersection between critical raw materials and renewable energy. The possibility of extracting strategic minerals from geothermal fluids and the critical raw materials geothermal project is a good example. This is a perfect example of what Europe needs: clean energy supply that is local, stable, and available 24/7, domestic supply of strategic materials, reducing our dependence on third countries, lower prices for households thanks to affordable heat and power, and all this while minimizing environmental impact. Geothermal energy, in particular, is a resource that Europe has barely begun to explore. It is renewable, reliable, and domestic, and it has a crucial role to play in decarbonizing, heating, and cooling sectors that represents almost half of our final energy consumption in the Union. It can also provide flexibility and stability to our energy system, complementing wind and solar. Yet, despite this enormous potential, geothermal development in the EU remains far behind other renewable technologies. At a time of climate emergency, with the urgent need to to reduce fossil fuel dependency, we simply cannot afford to overlook any clean and indigenous energy source. This Parliament has been clear. In our own initiative report last year, we called for a European real strategy to unlock geothermal energy. That means, first, mapping and assessing resources across the entire EU territory. Secondly, simplifying and accelerating permitting. And third, creating proper financial instruments to the risk exploration and guarantee project viability. I have to say that today, Commissioner was present in the, Commissioner Jorgensen was present in the ITRE, the Energy and Innovative and Industrial Committee of this Parliament. We had a debate about the Energy Union, the state of the Energy Union. And he let us know one very important thing, that the geothermal plant will be included in the heating and cooling strategy. I signed a letter some days ago requesting to the Commissioner a dedicated strategy for geothermal energy. Maybe it's not 100% what we have requested, but I think are good news that will be included in this new strategy. So I think we have good news today for the geothermal energy in Europe. But let me insist on one last point. It's fundamental. The transition must be fair. Guaranteeing access to strategic material is not enough. We need to ensure that the benefits, energy savings, jobs, lower bills, new industrial opportunities are shared widely. We must develop businesses, models, and social frameworks that increase public acceptance. So I look forward to debate and to continue our work together to make Europe's energy system decarbonized, better renewable, affordable, and secure, while reinforcing the strategic autonomy that our citizens expect and deserve. It's time to take advantage of our own possibilities. It's not time to stop the transition or rolling back the transition and be reliant again and again on fossil fuels that are not Europeans. So please, trust in Europe, trust in geothermal, trust in renewables. Have a good debate. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, for your kind words and for the urgency you have put to the topic. And I think we all agree that with geothermal we are on a good way to harness our domestic energy sources, and now we would also combine this with critical raw materials, and this is really what our today's debate is about. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Simona Regensburg. Simona Regensburg is the project coordinator of the CRM-geothermal project. She is a scientist at the GFZ Helmholtz Center for Geoscience and has studied geology and hydrology at the Ludwig-Maximilians University in Munich. She then graduated with a PhD in environmental sciences at the University of Bamberg, also in Germany, and then had some years as a postdoc research associate across different countries, US, Sweden, and Germany, and Switzerland. Since 2009, she is a part of the GFZ, the Helmholtz Center for Geosciences, and is also teaching at the Freie University in Berlin. In 2025, she has earned a professorship at the Freie University of Berlin, and today she will present
about our CRM-geothermal project today and about the importance it might have for the EU economy, to discuss later. So how do I navigate here? Good. So let's start talking about critical raw materials. You all probably know that there's increasing need for critical raw materials that comes with the transition to renewable energies and to the transition to electrical cars. You see an example picture here, like a normal combustion car, and the critical raw materials it needs as compared to an electric car, which needs much more critical raw materials. It's the same for like the infrastructure for renewable energies, like windmills, for example. They need a lot of critical raw materials. And and that's the reason why, because we have an increasing need of critical raw materials, why the EU gives a list of critical raw materials every few years. You probably know about this list. We have now the 5th list of critical raw materials where all the elements are defined that are critical. Critical means that they are economically very important and have a high supply risk. This is different for every region in the world. The EU has their own critical raw materials. Yes. Next, Anita, please. Due to the importance of critical raw materials for the EU has set the CRMA, the Critical Raw Materials Act, that says, among others, that until 2030, the critical raw materials extraction and the processing should come from European countries, 10% of the extraction and 40% of the processing critical raw materials. There's also another act from the EU, and that is about the net zero. That is the Net Zero Industry Act that says that by 2030 the EU should manufacture at least 40% of its annual deployment needs for key net zero technologies. And one of these net zero technologies is also the geothermal energy. And now we are combining those two, but next please. Before I want to tell you some words about geothermal energy, because it might be that it's not so familiar with every one of you how it works. So geothermal energy uses the heat of the earth for heat or electricity production. It is normally, if you go deeper into the earth, it's getting warmer. So if you have that's an average 3 degrees C per 100 meter. And one accesses the seed by drilling wells. And one needs to enter a formation, a geological formation that carries water, deep groundwater, and that should be hot. So what one needs for geothermal energy, hot water, so high temperatures are needed, and the fluids, the water that flows there, that is the carrier for heat. But and it's a mixture of all kind of gases and water and all kinds of chemical elements. So usually these waters are very, very saline and carry many chemical components. So the fluid is pumped to the surface will be pumped to the surface, used for heat extraction, and then pumped back. So this is the red well, so the red line basically, and then the heat is extracted, used for electricity or heat provision, and then the cold fluid is pumped back into the underground. We have the second well, the blue line. And this can be different formations that need to have the right temperatures and a good permeability in the underground. Next, please. On the left hand, you see now the idea of the co-production. The idea is, again, you have the two wells, the well that produces the fluid, the hot fluid, then the energy is removed from it's extracted basically from the fluid for heat or electricity production, and before the fluid will be re-injected into the underground, so into the blue well, the idea is to extract the potentially critical raw materials that are in the fluid. It's just to extract them and use them, for example, for lithium production. And this is a very interesting way of mining, because it would not have all the negative environmental impact that you have with traditional mining. You see that on the right, where you need a lot of land space, high energy consumption, and where we are usually highly dependent on other countries that have these big mines. but instead, next please, you would have, you see a picture of the geothermal facility in Insheim, where they produce electricity and lithium actually, and that needs little space and little energy consumption and also low CO2 emissions. Next please. And now let's go back to our list of critical raw materials in Europe. You've seen the same list I showed before, and next I marked those elements that could occur in geothermal fluids. And on the next picture, you see a table that shows you these marked elements and a geothermal formation in northern Germany where they produced geothermal fluid, and you see the concentrations of these different critical raw materials that occur in these fluids. You see, for example, for lithium, that's on the top of the list, they're 200 milligrams per liter. And one can also assume a certain price that of course varies, that is the next in the line, and then one can calculate the amount of lithium that can be produced per certain time, let's say for a year, the kilogram of lithium that can be produced if everything can be extracted from this well. So this would be like 87,000 kilograms per year. And this, so one can say that this geothermal well could provide 0.15% of EU's annual need for lithium in 2030. So this is the calculated amount for 2030. So actually only one well can provide a lot of lithium. That is just the rough calculations, or considering, of course, all the money for the extraction itself. Next, please. So the central questions that we now have in the project is which and how much of critical raw materials actually occur in the geothermal waters. Next. How can they be extracted quickly and selectively, and how can a co-production be economically viable? And with that, then the main central question is the co-production of geothermal heat and critical raw materials an alternative to boost geothermal energy and domestic critical raw material supply? Next, please. And for that, we have developed the CRM-geothermal project. We are like 20 partners and 19 affiliated entities that work on these questions, coming from research institutes, universities, but also industry and geological surveys. There's also a link here to our website. And next, please. And this slide shows you what we are looking at in the project and the central objectives. So we want to see actually what critical raw materials actually occur in the different fluids across Europe. We want to know the geological constraints, so what controls the critical raw materials, why are certain critical raw materials occurring in certain fluids, and how sustainable is an extraction. Then we want to develop technologies for the extraction itself. We want to assess the environmental, social and governmental aspects, and in the end we want to demonstrate at a pilot site that a co-production can be feasible. Next, please. So I guide you now through these different aspects we are doing in this project, or what we achieved so far. For the database actually of critical raw materials, just to see how much of which critical raw materials occur in different formations. We did a screening of all geothermal fluids we found in Europe, that there were all of them where we found data for. They were put in a database and in an atlas, so the atlas is now available, and so one can see for each geothermal site what is actually in there. A little bit of a problem is, so we have 4,000 wells with fluid composition, that not for all wells, the entire geothermal fluid composition was measured. So for some, we only have few elements measured, so just the main components, not all the critical materials. But still, for lithium, it was possible to develop an AI-based estimation tool to calculate if you have some elements, the main elements only measured, one can calculate which lithium, how high the lithium concentration should be. So the link for this lithium estimation tool is also given here. And then we are coming next, please, to the next goal we wanted to be investigated in the project is about the geological controls. And next, please, so we looked at 4 different geological settings, and as a geologist, I will guide you now a little bit to the geological heterogeneities and questions we actually have, because the underground is not the same everywhere. So we looked at 4 different types. The most frequent type you find across the world is actually sedimentary basin systems. Here we have basically one sedimentary layer built on top of the others. These are very favored geological formation for geothermal energy, because some of these sedimentary formations, like limestones or sandstones, have a good permeability and can be used for geothermal, or are frequently used for geothermal energy extractions. And we had a closer look in the project at the areas in Germany, mainly the North German basin. You see on the right on the maps that the areas where in Germany we have sedimentary basins, these are marked in colors. And we looked in the north, and we found actually that the critical raw materials in the fluids of the North German basins are mainly occurring in only one formation. So of these, all these different formation packages, only one, the deepest one, actually the Rotliegend, that carries a lot of lithium and strontium and copper. So one has to really look at this formation, why actually here is an increased amount. Next, please. Another type location we looked at are volcanic areas, like we have in Turkey or in Iceland. And here we also looked at lithium and many other metals like zinc, copper, and so on. And we found that the critical raw materials are mainly enriched in the scales. These scales are what you see on the right-hand side, the precipitates that form like around a pipe or in the few facilities that precipitate from the thermal water. So the fluids themselves are relatively poor in critical raw materials, but the scalings, these minerals, they are enriched in certain critical raw materials, but only in those areas that are influenced by seawater. Next, please. And then we have another type of volcanic areas we looked at, and that's the East African areas, countries along the East African Rift. Here we find a different type of geothermal fluid, alkaline fluids. The areas here marked in green, they are very, they show good properties for geothermal use. And we expected in these alkaline fluids actually to find a lot of rare earth elements. However, that we did not find in the waters, but we found a good potential for geothermal for sure. And next, please. And the last type of geology we look closer at are crystalline systems. You also very frequently find around the world. We looked at mainly in Cornwall and granites, and here we found we looked mainly for lithium, found lithium and also palladium in the deeper circulating fluids of these Cornwall granites. And next, please. And now I'm coming to the question of actually how to extract the critical raw materials from the geothermal brine. And so this is actually, I think, one of the main challenges. In the next picture you can see that. So we're looking now at this part of the actual extraction of the critical raw material. So in a geothermal fluid we have a lot of chemical components, a lot of sodium and chloride and calcium and everything else. And these are marked now by these different colored dots, and we just want to pick out, let's say, the yellow dots, which might be the lithium. So only this should be somehow removed from the water. And that needs to go very fast and very selective, because we have a high flow through of the water through the system, and we want to re-inject the water quickly. It has to be temperature resistant, pressure resistant, corrosion resistant. So, and this is the technological difficulty actually. And next, please. And so we need to find an extraction method that just retains now the yellow dots, the lithium, for example, that remains at the surface, and the rest can be re-injected again. And next, please. For that, we developed this in the project, different technologies, mainly lab-based, so based on laboratory experiments. And we looked at different critical raw materials and different technologies. I will not talk about all of them now. But there are a lot of different approaches based on the size and the charge of the elements. We used also biological enrichment methods or membranes, all kind of things. You see an example of manganese oxides, which have a crystal structure that is just right enough that the small lithium ion would retain in there and nothing else. And so we put the manganese oxide on a carrier material, and then we tested in flow-through experiments in the lab how fast and how effective actually the lithium would be removed from a brine. And this methodology will then later be used for the demonstrator, but before I come to the demonstrator for the site, one word, next please, about the environmental, social and governmental assessments, which are of course of very high importance, mainly also to get the acceptance of people for these technologies. So concerning the environmental aspects, we compared fluxes on every processing step between conventional mining and the co-extraction approach, and checklists have been identified for the environmental lists along the value chain, along the life cycle of a system. You find the results actually also for the other assessments here on the QR codes here. So I just can mention actually that we considered all that. For the social aspects, we investigated how to obtain and maintain a social license to operate and develop practical guidelines on how to build mutual trust. And for the governmental assessment, we did an overview on legislation and regulation in the different EU countries and Turkey. So for each country, different laws are of course valid, and they were considered and assessed in our studies. And then the last part of our project, next please, is the demonstration of all these aspects I showed before, and the geological assessment and the social SLO assessment and the extraction technology. We want to show and demonstrate that on our site, in our demonstration site in Cornwall in the UK. And here we have a site in United Downs, so drilled into where the partners of Consortium drilled into granite. And so we had the chance in 2024 to characterize the site together with them, the hydrogeology, the hydrochemistry, mineralogy of the cores, and investigated all that. And next year, we hope we will be able to demonstrate with a mini plant to demonstrate the extraction process, so that we can extract the lithium directly at the site and can prove that the whole approach actually is working. And next slide, and now this is my last slide. I can summarize that we consider that the co-production has strong potential to contribute to the CRMA and to the Net Zero Industry Act, because we consider it's both effects. But still, research, data, and political support is needed to make it market ready. So, in terms of research research is needed to predict the target areas. We need more chemical data and a better geological understanding still. So we need more settings actually to look more closer at the setting, collect more data, and to make to produce market-ready CRMs. We have to say that extraction technologies are still all in development stage, so the technologies are still mainly lab-based, with main problems on selectivity. So for that, more field data, or actually field demonstration is clearly needed. This is done for lithium very well, but for the other critical raw materials, there is definitely much research needed. And with that, so last one, I want to thank you for your attention, thanks for being here, and thanks to the team of the CRM-geothermal project for all the nice results we got so far.
Thank you very much, Simone, for your presentation. You can stay here because you will stay on the panel. And now I will invite my colleague Pavlos Tirogolou from the European Federation of Geologists. Pavlos is a geoengineer. He has more than 20 years of experience also with industrial projects and has worked on project development for a long time. And he is part of our CRM-geothermal project. He will share the discussion together with me. Pavlos, welcome.
Thank you. So, so I will co-moderate this discussion today. I think what I'm going to do first is provide a framework of the discussion, and then we will ask each member of the panel to come up while we, of course, we introduce them. So, the main theme of the panel discussion is based on how the innovation, how can help actually save the EU economy from being a capital-intensive economy to an innovative one, and how the integration of geothermal energy, renewable energy, clean energy with critical raw materials actually provide this framework and make EU competitive. And of course always with the integration of the social acceptance and social license to operate, which is very important. So we will explore this with the panel members during the discussion. So the first one that I would like to ask to take position with us is Christine Banken. Thank you. I hope I pronounced your name well. It's okay. Now, Christine is team leader for energy security and electricity from the Directorate of General for Energy, Unit F4 Energy Security and Safety. And it's interesting that before Christine actually took that position, she has also worked as a consultant. Okay, so you have your industrial experience, and that's super important. So I will read your resume, and then you can invite the next person. So Christine works for the European Commission, as I said, and her team focuses on security of electricity supply, the protection of critical energy infrastructure, climate adaptation, cyber security in energy installation, the screening of foreign indirect investment case concerning the energy sector. So as I said, before joining the Commission, she has worked as a consultant on different assignments in the energy, automotive, and agricultural sectors, helping Japanese clients optimizing their policy decision or developing successful business strategies. Interesting. Thank you very much for being here, because you will provide different aspects on the discussion. So, Katrin, can you?
Yeah. So I would like to invite the next speaker, Mark Harris. He's from Cornish and also part of our CRM-geothermal project. Mark has over 25 years of experience in the water industry and brings innovative solutions to process design challenges and tries in collaborative settings with colleagues who bring their unique insights to the table. As I said, he's a lead process engineer with over 10 years experience in wastewater process design engineering. In Cornish he's responsible for setting up the direct use extraction power plant or pilot plant, and in that function he's also here today to bring us insights into the process, so how it's actually functioning, but also represents the industry side, so the ones who really commercialize on the process that we have been suggesting in the project. Welcome.
So I'll go for the next one, which is Kęstutis Kucis. I hope I pronounced your name well. I do apologize if I'm not. And Kęstutis is the Vice President of the Lithuanian Consumers Alliance. Before that, and he still remained very active with the European Economic and Social Committee. The committee actually is the EU advisory body to the co-legislators, and Kęstutis has provided many support on this committee, and will also offer insights during this discussion. Kęstutis also holds a diploma in systematic analysis from the Vilnius University. Thank you very much for being here with us. Appreciate it. Yes.
And then the last one is Emily Ritchie. Emily is policy manager in supply chains and the T&E committee. She joined the T&E in 2024 to work on responsible battery and mineral supply chain policy. Prior to joining the TNE, she worked for the Confederation of British Industry in their Brussels office, leading on EU and international trade policy, and previously held other roles in EU and UK public policy. Emily studied French and history at the King's College in London and has a master's in political science from the University Libre de Bruxelles. Emily, nice to meet you.
So we can start our discussion. And I will start first, my first question actually with Christine. My first question will be, in light of global challenges in ensuring supply chains, how would you judge the importance of European raw materials production to strengthen renewable energy technologies made in Europe and to ensure European leadership in renewable energy?
Yes, thanks a lot. I'm very happy to be here, so thank you for the kind invitation. I think partly this question has already been answered by the great opening remarks we heard earlier. But to break it down, I mean, let me start maybe with the reality that we all recognize. Europe's energy transition depends on secure and reliable and also sustainable supply of critical raw materials. As we heard also in the opening remarks, every wind turbine, solar panel, batteries for storage, but of course also EV, electrolyzers for hydrogen production are reliant on materials that are today heavily concentrated in certain supply chains. Just to name some example, currently China processes about 90%, if not more, of the global rare earth elements. Turkey controls 98% of our European boron imports, and lithium, cobalt, graphite, just to name some examples, supply chain are also exposed to major geopolitical vulnerabilities. And this just to set the scene a little bit, and just to say that it's very important that we acknowledge that no industrial strategy can be sustainable and secure and reliable if it rests on such concentrated dependencies. And this is then exactly why we need a responsible European production. Of course, such responsible European production is not to replace international trade. I mean, we are all aware that domestic production alone, even also if we increase circularity, will not cover all of our needs when it comes to critical raw materials. But we still need to anchor a minimum level of strategic capacity here at home. And this is because it creates resilience in a world where supply chains are increasingly politically weaponized. And also it's important to note, as we have also seen in the great presentation of the CRM-geothermal project, that if we produce in Europe, we also produce under very high environmental, social and governance standards, and it's actually traceable and transparent, so we know where it comes from. And this is not just the cost, I would argue, but it's also a competitive advantage, because then it means that the technologies that later on are labeled made in Europe are actually trusted worldwide. And of course also projects like these CRM-geothermal projects show exactly the kind of European technologies that we like to see and that we would like to support and like to scale up. Because this project is on the one hand extracting critical raw materials that we need for the clean energy transition, but on the other hand it is also already producing clean and renewable energy. So really these are the kind of solutions that strengthen not only our energy security, but also our industrial competitiveness. And just one last small point is that, of course, this Made in Europe approach is not only about securing supply chains. It's a big part, but it's not the only part. It's also about jobs, so increasing the domestic job market, about investments into our domestic infrastructure, and also about Europe's long-term global leadership when it comes to clean technologies. Because if we want to lead in the clean energy transition, then of course first we need to secure its material foundation. Thank you.
Much appreciated for your answer. I will now ask Catherine to ask our pathway to impact part of the project.
Thanks.
Your question. Thank you.
Yeah, very nice. We've seen now that how important the process is and how important the critical raw materials are also for the European independency. Mark, as the representative of an industry partner who wants to extract the how do you see, what are the challenges that you expect to see in your process flow sheet? So what are the challenges you see in setting up the extraction?
Well, I can only answer from the perspective of the kind of direction that I've been given by the leaders of my company, and that is to try and provide a saleable lithium product. Our brine is surprisingly clean compared to most people's brine. Talk about other people as a phrase, other companies within Europe. Our brine is from the granite source. There's very little in it. There's a bit of sodium, a bit of calcium, very little strontium, and pretty much after that there's nothing else. So the easiest way for us to extract lithium is to use ion exchange. And so the two key products from that is, well, in terms of supplying a lithium product for the EV market, is the lithium chloride and the lithium sulfate, because one of the standard ways of producing precursor CAM products is a lithium hydroxide and a lithium carbonate product. And so there's an entire flow sheet already been pre-designed based on lithium removal from hard rock, which is one of the earliest and easiest ways of obtaining it. And of course, from hard rock, you need very strong acids. So it's lithium chloride and lithium sulfate. Now the product that we get from ion exchange is roughly between 70% and 80% pure. So we still need to remove some contaminants from that, and also we need to concentrate it further. So the type of product that you get from ion exchange is roughly about 2 grams per litre, and we need to get it up to something like 5 grams per litre, depending on what kind of conversion technology we go through. So in terms of where we are at the moment, we've focused on a few ion exchange companies. We're going to go forward for a demonstration plant as of next year. It will be ion exchange, and then from that, the Elliott products, we've then got to ship out to all these different other technologists to purify it, to concentrate it, and then to convert it. But one thing that I found interesting is that in the actual CAM manufacturing process, there seems to be an opportunity for geothermal brine where we could be more competitive, I think, but I've yet to learn the reasons why not. But we could go directly to a lithium phosphate. There's a benefit of that, I think, in that to create LFP cathodes, all you have to do is add lithium phosphate with iron phosphate and phosphoric acid, give it a good old mix, and end it with LFP. In Europe, not far from us in Morocco, there's a huge supply of phosphate, and I also understand in Norway we've been mining for phosphate as well, which is also predicted to have quite a huge reserve. So I find it interesting that here in Europe we seem to be focused on NMC as our cathode material rather than LFP. And a little bit of research that I have done, maybe one of my esteemed colleagues up here on the panel can explain to me, but I think that Europe's only focusing around 16% of its cathode manufacturing into LFP. So I have some challenges for the whole industry, because from my perspective, in order for Europe to be less reliant on critical materials, really, if we're wanting to supply lithium for an EV product, LFP seems to be a simple, easy flow sheet process choice, and especially for geothermal brine, because there seems to be some very relatively simple processes for extracting lithium from geothermal brine, which could make geothermal brine more competitive than extracting lithium from iron.
Thank you for that. So my next question will be for Simona. And during the CRM-geothermal project, we're really advancing the state of the art, recreating a lot of innovative techniques. And the major thing that comes into mind is how, with these methods, how we can actually create breakthroughs, how we can scale them up, so we can actually make them commercial.
Yes, well, there's probably no easy answer to that because we have really to compare each system individually. Even for lithium, where it's already quite advanced, the production, you've seen the comments from Mark, they already have a lithium product, which is probably scalable also. But each site has different problems even with their lithium extraction. So some are still fighting on the purity, some need to scale up the extraction process itself, extraction material that you need to produce in a high amount. So there's a different aspects for scaling up for each of the individual sites, I would say. And then also, of course, if you go away from lithium, everything else is mainly still in a lab scale extraction technology phase. So there we need to start with a demonstrator, with a small demonstrator mini plant, like what we are doing for lithium now in Cornwall. This also has to be demonstrated also, of course, on a small scale at a site, and then scale it up. And here, of course, other problems will come, and one has to consider each step actually and think about how to scale it up. And for each we need probably a little bit more research or working strongly with companies to bring it together forward to see what is the little screw we have to turn in order to get to the next step.
Thanks a lot, Simona. I would have the next questions directly afterwards to Kestutis. You have heard now about the possibilities and the challenges that we still have. What is, from the consumer and social perspective, what are the key conditions to ensure that those processes and the ideas that we have that are driven by the Critical Raw Materials Act remain just and affordable?
Thank you for having me here. And indeed, that's a very important question and a pretty wide one, because actually we have a multi-layer issue here, from geopolitical challenges to social acceptance, scientific challenges, and many more. However, if I take an approach built on social license to operate, which is also part of your project works, I was quite happy to see that there is a deliverable, which usually what happens with deliverables, you put it on a shelf, and sometimes in 2 years they are outdated. But I think the one that you just advertised on the screen about the recommendations how to obtain social license to operate, I think that will have a longer life, and I will definitely use that for certain other projects and debates, because it's also, it could be copy-pasted to any other important, let's say, initiative, be it windmill or any other big development project. So thank you for that. And indeed, this could create a basis for a debate between the two most important groups: the proponents of development and opponents of development. And in that case, I believe that civil society and the body which I was part of back in 2020, 2025, my term just finished months ago. That body, the ESC, the European Economic and Social Committee, is pretty much a good platform to start with, because it connects employers, employees, diverse civil society organizations, including young people, older people, women, local communities, and environmentalists, consumers, and so on. So what you have is a variety of opinions at one space. So that might be a good prerequisite to transform a project from not in my backyard into, yes, I'm okay if it's in my backyard, only if some conditions are met. And those conditions are, of course, It should be fair, it should be clean, it should be beneficial for people living in the area. Or imagine a situation where you even have a project which could be titled preferably in my backyard, because I have the benefits, I own the benefits, I live there, and I know it's important for the world, it's important for the green transition at the global level, at the European level, and also it provides a clean energy to my community. I mean, it may sound a little bit naive and perhaps too optimistic, but I think that could be a result that may be tested with a combination of geothermal plus critical raw material extraction. So thanks for the project team for providing this really good model, and also for certain deliverables which may potentially be used for much wider audiences, not just scientific society with working in critical raw materials. One more thing, critical raw materials could be much better sold, sold is a bad word, would be much better presented to the public if it is transition materials. I think many NGOs, many civil society actors demand this change in narrative, the change in terminology. Transition materials, okay, if you like the critical part, critical transition materials. I think that may be a very important change which we could achieve, because changing words matter. That's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kasulis, maybe can I ask Mark directly on this, because Kasulis was mentioning if you can make people see that it's even beneficial for them to have it in your backyard. Do you have experience in Cornwall? How do people see the project, and do they find it already beneficial, or are they still a bit skeptic?
I think there's a lot of people in our country who are sceptical about the whole ethos about moving away from combustion engines to EV cars, and how that's going to be, how the infrastructure is going to have to change, not to supply that. And even from my perspective, I have a little bit of skepticism, because from me we're going to need a whole change possibly to the way we live. But from a perspective of a mining operation house, there's a lot of support. There's a little bit of resistance when it comes to changing the surrounding environment, and so we are seeing a little bit of resistance to our so our company has a hard-run project as well as a geothermal project. The geothermal brine project has a lot more support, I would say, than the hard-run project, because it's a much cuter solution. There's just a very small factories, very small infrastructure in terms of its production. You're not changing the environment to any great extent. We pull the brine out of the ground, do some magic, bit of a black box, and then we have it deal with the exit brine that we put back underground, and it impacts nobody. But we benefit greatly. We benefit from the metals that we're able to recover, and also the geothermal heat that we're able to supply. We do have, as part of our ongoing process, we are going towards commercial entities to see if we can work with them to produce the heat that they need. So we have had some interest with factories and from residential development. So, does that answer the question?
No, I think that was perfect.
We go to Emily now. And actually I will place my question based also on what Christine said. So the energy transition, decarbonization will require a huge and immense amount of critical raw materials, especially for components that are required on renewable machinery and equipment, but also for batteries. Now the main thing is, it's very important because it comes back where we started on the European Union competitiveness, where we create jobs, but also well-paid jobs, how we can balance the environmental protection, the social justice and trust, and of course the industrial competitiveness.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a great question. I think the key word is balance, as you say. So I think with the Critical Raw Materials Act,
we have a great framework which really gets that balance in terms of looking at how we can secure supply of raw materials whilst also having the social and environmental safeguards. So what we really need now is, to turn to implementation. Work has started. How can we make sure that, a lot of the projects that have been designated strategic project status are getting the investment and the support needed so that these projects become a reality, particularly when we're thinking about the scaling up of the innovative technologies that we've heard about today. Maybe in terms of where Europe can go further on some of the legislative frameworks, I think one area is EU batteries regulation. We have due diligence rules, so really making sure that companies are responsible for addressing the social and environmental impacts in their supply chain. These rules have been delayed, and I think what's key now is making sure that we don't see a weakening of these rules and we push forward with full, strong implementation, given where we know this can really support some of the responsible projects that we're hearing about. And I think the second area we see a gap is on mining waste in Europe. The EU Extractive Waste Directive is, in our eyes, out of date. And if we commit to updating these rules as part of the Circular Economy Act, we could really sort of create a market to scale some of the innovative technologies in waste management, whether that's in filtered tailings or other areas. But it could also provide space to drive more remining or reprocessing of mining waste. So just a couple of areas. And then I think coming to the final point, obviously the industrial competitiveness, which is of course key. So I think, we've heard already people are feeling left behind by the transition, so we need to make sure that as we transition to EVs, that we bring, that brings political support and the support of the citizens, and as part of that, obviously creating good quality jobs and making sure that Europe is not just an assembly plant for electric vehicles and other clean tech, but we're really onshoring the whole battery value chain. And there's a really opportunity with the upcoming Industrial Accelerator Act to define what we mean by sort of a made in Europe battery. And I think thinking about what we're talking about today, really interesting on how, as part of that definition, we look at how we define local raw materials. So how we can define it to, yes, reward raw materials from Europe and also from other partner countries. So looking at where you could perhaps raw materials from countries where we have a clean trade and investment partnership being seen as also a local material and supporting that definition. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, thanks so much. Catherine, if you can make the next question for Christine. I think Christine also might have to leave, so.
Yeah. So what would you see as the main policy instruments under the Critical Raw Materials Act and the EU Energy Framework to accelerate the deployment of these innovations?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I really agree with Emily on basically everything she said, but most of all also really on the importance of circularity. And a big part there is waste. And right now we export most of our waste, and then we have it recycled abroad, often again in China, and then we re-import it. And that is obviously not a very viable business model for our competitiveness in the EU. So completely agree that we need to do better when it comes to keeping our waste in the EU and recycle it domestically. I mean, a lot of the policy instruments that we have for this have already been mentioned. I mean, the Critical Raw Materials Act, first and foremost, a great policy framework that also for the first time, as we have already seen on some slides, has benchmarks, so targets for 2030. Then we have, as Emily already mentioned, of course, the designation of strategic projects that benefit from priority status, binding permitting deadlines to really accelerate bringing these projects online. It also gives them better access to public and private financing, for example, also from the European Investment Bank. So the critical raw materials is really important and is a great step forward. And of course, it's kind of the start of this whole clean tech supply chain because it covers the secure supply of the materials that we need to produce the clean tech. And then the next step, which we've already seen on some slides, is then the Net Zero Industry Act, which then covers the next part of the supply chain, similarly to the CRM Act, with better permitting procedures and such. because it covers the manufacturing capabilities in the EU. And together, I think we can really say that the CRM Act and then the Net Zero Industry Act form the industrial backbone of our clean energy transition. And then when we look at the energy side, of course, then it's very important that renewable energy projects can come online, and that especially the permitting does not take 10 years, for example, for a wind farm project, as it has in the past. And there, I mean, I think we all know that after Russia's war of aggression started in Ukraine in 2022, we came out with REPower EU, so a plan that also very heavily included the acceleration of the clean energy transition. Following up on that, we revised the Renewable Energy Directive to also ensure faster deployment of renewables, and again through accelerated permitting, for example. Also go to areas, stronger integration of system planning, so not looking at things sectoral, but making sure everything is efficient and as fast as possible. Of course, while still making sure that we have high environmental, social and governance standards. We also have another important part, which is the reform of our electricity market design, because there the focus is more on strengthening long-term stability, so more financial tools such as contracts of difference or power purchase agreements give investors predictable revenues and lower capital costs and some planning stability and investment stability, which is especially essential for capital intensive projects such as renewable energy projects often are. And then, of course, for research and development and projects, we do have funding in the EU, as you know, because you are being funded, luckily also by us under Horizon Europe. We also have the Innovation Fund, we have Invest EU, we have certain state aid frameworks also in place, specifically targeted towards the clean transition. So many of these tools also explicitly welcome these first-of-a-kind hybrid projects like this one. And yeah, so I think and I hope that in combination these kind of instruments create a coherent and predictable environment where we can move projects such as this one forward. Thanks.
Yeah, but may jump in just with a remark on the back of what you just said. That I have a feeling that the success of the enterprise like this, the combined geothermal and critical raw materials extraction, may not necessarily be placed in the CRMA area. It may be more related to things which build a cohesive landscape of European policies from completely different fields. Think of battery regulation and all the initiatives around the battery alliance and stuff like that. Yeah, so, I mean, working with people, with industrial chains may be much more important in terms of success in the future compared to a specific policy push initiatives. And or think of workers' acceptance. Like there are two most important ILO what's that? The conventions, right? The ILO conventions on health and safety, and half of the European countries haven't ratified at least one of the two. And there are 5 countries which haven't ratified any of the two. So perhaps that working on better standards for work may create an environment of more social, of more acceptance, better acceptance among the people. And also another example, thinking of financing, like diluting all the sustainable finance rules may simply mean that more capital is flowing overseas, where the standards are not upheld, and less capital is available for probably less risky, less profitable, but European and better environmentally based projects. So diluting CSDDD is probably quite important too in the whole green transition, right? Compared to some nitty-gritty in the specific area of critical raw materials regulation field.
Thanks a lot, Christine. I would like to come back to one remark also from Christine. You mentioned circularity and waste management is very important. Maybe Simona, can you say something about what role you see in, for this combined extraction in terms of waste? Is there any waste products coming out, and or could we even make things better?
Both. Yeah, I mean, even for geothermal energy, which is a renewable, sustainable energy, there's waste coming out. We have this, I showed you the picture with the scales, like these precipitates that form due to cooling, for example, that form along the pipes, and that can be quite substantial, so that you find every geothermal site that can contain critical raw materials as well, but that's also something that can contain heavy metals and radionuclides. So this is something every geothermal operator actually has to deal with. One can try to avoid it by using different temperatures in the geothermal plant, or by adding inhibitors, and then you would have it removed from the as precipitate, but keep it in solution, so one can avoid actually the scales by using the right technology. So this is, often these technologies are known, sometimes not. But of course, if you start now to extract the critical raw materials, there might be additional scaling that form, and that has to be avoided as well. So that, in my opinion, there is always a solution for each of these potential scales. One just needs to maybe put a little bit amount of more research, or maybe there's a solution already available, so that you will not have the scales, or you will have only a very few amount of this waste, and that has to be stored properly in the end.
I think, Christine, because you have also other commitments, if you would like to use the opportunity and escape from further interrogation from us. Okay.
Is it possible to ask a question before she leaves?
Yeah.
Okay,
Please.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I have two questions that involve you somehow. So the first one is, I mean, we have been discussing, and you said preferably in my backyard is something we want, but in fact preferably in my backyard is not enough. Because the EU wants innovation-driven clean technologies, and us in industry, we are really aligned to this, but we risk doing that too late. We have China, which is already securing a market share inside the EU. They already have 15 major plants or investments going on in EV manufacturing, and also in EV battery investments. So if Europe waits until after 2027 or 2030 to deploy these innovation incentives, the value chain may be already structurally locked in by these foreign players, which are vertically building in here in Europe. So how will these industrial and innovation policies act fast enough to prevent Europe from replacing the fossil fuel dependency and dependency on foreign controlled clean technology ecosystems built in EU soil? That's very important, because they are taking our piece of cake here in Europe, the Chinese. What concrete mechanisms can accelerate so that this innovation happens before lock-in becomes irreversible? So made in Europe needs to happen. The cost is not only money, it's time. We need to act on this very fast.
Yes, thank you. I fully agree with what you have said, and I wish that the EU had come up with the CRM Act already 20 years ago, but it is now. And I think still, at least we're doing it now, but I completely agree that time is of the essence. And I mean, we're trying, the CRM Act and also the Net Zero Industry Act have gone through trilogue at record speed for such a huge acts. So that's also thanks to the Parliament and to the Council, because the trilogues were very productive and fast. And now it's being implemented. We work very closely with member states to make sure also the implementation goes as fast as possible. So a lot of progress is being made there. We have also really accelerated work with the strategic projects, and other openings will come, other calls will come next year as well on that. Another important thing is also that, as I said before, made in Europe, yes, but of course still we need to work with international partners, and there's a lot of international fora. I will, in the interest of time, not go into detail here, but G7, for example, standard-based markets, all that. So we work closely with our international partners as well. When it comes to increasing domestic production, here also the really fast implementation of NZIA and also the project that are designated under NZIA are very important to us. I had one more point that now escapes me. Making work. Sorry, Thank you. Yes, it was not the Industrial Accelerator Act, but it's all linked together because indeed, you're well aware that we have really accelerated work. It is more other DGs, not so much DG Energy, but we're of course involved on economic security. So that does not cover only critical raw materials, but of course that is a huge part of economic security for the EU. So yes, the Industrial Accelerator Act will come out. We also have, as you might remember, the CRM Center that is on its way. We have the joint purchasing platform for critical raw materials that has just come online, that has been presented this week at the Critical Raw Materials Week. So there's a lot of initiatives also that are really targeted towards our domestic industry to increase also domestic industry really building up the value chain and not making the mistake of falling into a new dependency after ending the dependency on Russian fossil fuels. So I completely agree with you, and we're trying to move as fast as possible.
And my last question. So I see geothermal CRM extraction is really an innovative opportunity, but it cannot deliver competitiveness alone without coordinated innovation through the value chain, processing, refining, component manufacturing, end use implementation in the market. Then Europe will simply extract materials without value chain creation, because that will still happen either elsewhere or by foreign players within our soil. So how will the EU policy ensure that this cross-sector orchestration happens, triggering that there is no fragmentation on fully European value chains?
Yes, I mean, I think one important point is that the Critical Raw Materials Act, of course, not only focuses on extraction, it focuses on the whole supply chain, and the big focus is also on really building up the midstream of the supply chain, so processing, refining, and then later on also recycling. And as I've outlined a bit with the answer to the second question I received, is that in the Commission we of course follow a whole of economy approach. So of course we have the CRMA, we have net zero industry, we have in our energy sector, I mentioned a lot of directives and legislations, and they all need to be coherent and they all need to come together to deliver. So I do not see such an issue with this whole of economy approach that this project would kind of not be able to be scaled up or to deliver also across sectors.
Thank you.
Question for you?
Yeah, thank you very much. Romain Charvet, I work for CRMA, a French mining and metallurgical company, and we have a strategic project of geothermal lithium in Alsace, which is called Agili, and we are in partner with Electricité de Strasbourg, who is a long-time expert in geothermal energy. And the main challenge for us is financing, because it's really capex intensive. And in compared to other projects that we had, and we are the first industrial European player to open a lithium mine in Argentina, the capex is way more intensive in Alsace, because you need to go really deep into a seismic area. And we applied for the Innovation Fund for the second time, and unfortunately we couldn't get the funds, and we are on the reserve list. So we are really close to the edge, but unfortunately there is not enough money in this Innovation Fund call of project for 2024. So we really look into the resource EU initiatives and the next call for project, and maybe the next MFF, to get this funding help to close the competitiveness gap of such really revolutionary project, because once this wall of capex is done, then the lithium is really competitive and is CO2 free, because we have geothermal energy to run the plant. So we really count on Europe to deliver on the promises of the strategic project level that we got to really have clean and sovereign lithium production in France. Thank you very much.
More questions?
Hi, Azim Ali from Vulcan Energy. Actually, I wanted to raise a question to the European Commission representative who just left. We are also one of the strategic projects, colleagues, ICC, and honestly speaking, I don't know how to use this wonderful insignia. It's a nice thing, spent a couple of months to apply for that, a lot of emails, etc., but nothing to apply, to use it for. And it's all good that we're talking, dialogue is a wonderful thing, but the industry is struggling, is dying, and we're still talking. A lot of discussions, CRMA, great product, but delayed, not to that extent how it could be, etc., etc. So I don't want to demotivate everybody before we close. I want just to name the things by word. A patient cannot be healed if the patient tells that I'm absolutely fine. And I think this little sobriety would not harm a dialogue. And maybe it could be CRM-geothermal, one of the pillars that you observe and monitor and quantify what is the contribution of the European community, union, etc., to the program. That would be a suggestion. Thank you very much.
Emily, if you want to reply on this one, I'm afraid we cannot take any more questions because the session is closed.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on both questions, and I think we fully appreciate and support the points raised. I think what I tried to point to earlier is CRMA is a good framework. It's designated some great projects, but now something needs to happen. We need real money and concrete action to support. I think everyone is looking at Resource EU, but it does seem, so far what we're hearing, to be a repackaging of existing measures rather than actually providing something new, whether that's in new money or new support. We know there's some money in the upcoming competitiveness fund in the next budget, but again, in a few years' time. So I think in terms of immediate actions, we're putting most of our hope on the Industrial Accelerator Act to at least create demand for European production.
So we still have some more time actually for questions. So if time was provided, so please, the gentleman at the back. Yes.
Can I just say something as
Yes,
well?
yes.
Sorry,
Can I-
going back to the two chaps that just spoke, as well as that, so we've got, just to help you guys out, we've got some financial support, and we're driving forward to prove that we can extract lithium with a demonstration plant. And you guys have been quite good at work on this already and progressed quite a lot. Larger colleague is also progressing, but the main problem that we're facing is trying to make it commercially viable. So in order to do that, the hard rock have got it easy because they can just, they've got everything in place to churn out huge quantities of lithium. It's richly in the rock, and the technique is an old mining system of production, whereas we're trying to be more innovative and use water treatment technology. And the kind of flow rates and the production rates that we're all thinking about using, we're really, especially with the current price of lithium, really struggling to ensure that we have a commercially viable product. And that is why part of one of the main reasons we come to this venue for this get together is that just help people think about, well, if it's easy for the hard rock to produce their products, and it's a challenge for geothermal brine to produce the same products, can we be thinking about producing other products but still supply the EV's supply chain? And that might be something that you want to consider.
Teemu Karmo from GTP Finland, from recycling of tungsten and cobalt. This silly question for the technical details for the geothermal energy. Is the lifetime of the well different if you think about the energy itself compared to the extraction of raw materials? I mean, do you run out of minerals before the well is itself done?
Well, this is a good question. It depends a little bit on the geothermal site and how the flow paths underground are. So there we differentiate like two types, like something that's called matrix dominated system, where the fluid goes through a rock matrix of different grains, where it takes a long time for the fluid to migrate from one well to the other. And the other is a so-called fractured system, where the fluid flows rather quickly from one well to the other. So both have their advantages, because in the fractures you have more water that can be pumped up at a certain time, but in the matrix it has more time to maybe dissolve the critical raw materials from the rocks also. So it depends a little bit on the system. And for the heat it might be a little bit different than for the critical raw materials, because yes, they might need to dissolve, they might have more time. But yeah, it has to be considered in the individual geothermal reservoir geological setting at the end.
Thank you very much. That concludes our panel discussion, and it's time now for our host to come and conclude this wonderful event. Thank you very much, all of you, that you have been here and provide us with your time.
Therefore, I have known that you had a very fruitful debate, a very intensive debate, told me. And you know, probably you need more time to continue the discussion, but in this parliament we have clear rules when it comes to time. You know that in the plenary debate we used to speak 1 minute. 1 minute speech. So you can imagine that you have to be very direct to the point. That's why there are other people waiting for friends in the room to have another debate. That's another part is a success for the parliament, that everybody wants to be here to have debates. But in this case, I think it was very interesting, and I think it's a very important issue, a key issue for Europe, for our energy transition, for our energy independence and strategic autonomy, how to deal with the new mining projects in our member states, that is strategic, and to find the better balance between take advantage of the resources and the public acceptance and the environmental protection. This is crucial, as you all know, but also how to find, how close the gap between the finance needed and the possibility to fail. Last April, I have visited some geothermal installations in Slovakia. They are trying to go deep and deep to find the resource and study how to use the critical raw materials. And they say that sometimes they fail. Who pays for the failure? So that's one thing that investors don't want, the risk. So the risking is important. And I think that every strategy, every plan that we can have in future should take into account that we need to improve the technology in order to reduce the possibility of failure and give to investors a signal that success is going to happen most of the times. And that this energy is safe and can be paired with other benefits when it comes to the mining of critical raw materials. So it can be a win-win solution for some investors. This is for me very clear, and I will defend this position in this part. So thank you for your debate, for being here today. I think that is a very fruitful discussion. Also, I miss some of your colleagues here, like my colleague Pablo Núñez, that is not today, but you are welcome always in the European Parliament. Thank you too much.
Yeah, well, thanks goes to you for hosting us. It has been a pleasure to be here with you, and pleasure to be here with all of our guests. And yeah, with that, I would like to thank you for the nice debate, and hope to see you soon.